What happens when country music's biggest star walks straight into the lion's den of daytime television and refuses to back down? The result? One of the most explosive confrontations ever broadcast live. Blake Shelton walked onto the view set with his trademark swagger, flashing that easy grin that usually disarms a crowd. The audience erupted in applause, thrilled to see him. Whoopi Goldberg welcomed him warmly, easing into small talk about his new album and upcoming tour. The atmosphere was light, almost playful. Then Joy Behar leaned forward, her expression sharp, her tone shifting. "Blake, I have to ask about some comments you made recently, about the music industry and political correctness. A lot of people found them, let's just say controversial." The grin stayed, but Blake's voice carried an edge now. "Well, Joy, I think folks are tired of being told what they can and can't say. Country music has always been about telling the truth, even when it makes people uncomfortable." Joy's eyes narrowed. "But don't artists have a responsibility? Your words reach millions. Isn't there a duty to be mindful of that?" "Those millions of people," Blake fired back, leaning forward now, "are smart enough to think for themselves. They don't need celebrities or TV hosts telling them what to believe." The tension thickened. Whoopi tried to steer the ship back toward safer waters, asking about his time on The Voice, but Joy pressed harder. "You talk about truth-telling, but country music has historically excluded so many voices. How do you reconcile that with this idea of authenticity?" Blake's jaw tightened. "You might be confusing country music with something else, Joy. Country's about the story. If you can sing it like you mean it, we don't care where you come from. We care about your heart." "Really?" Joy shot back. "Because the statistics say otherwise. The industry has been criticized for years over its lack of diversity." "Statistics?" Blake repeated with a bitter laugh. He shook his head. "You want to talk about numbers? Let me tell you what I see on tour. I see people from every walk of life, singing the same songs, crying at the same stories, laughing at the same jokes. That's real. That's what matters, not some number on a spreadsheet." The other hosts exchanged uneasy glances. Sarah Haynes tried to cut in with a lighter question, but Blake was locked in now, his voice rising. "And I'm real tired of people like you," he said, pointing directly at Joy. "Sitting in ivory towers, telling the rest of us how to live and what to think. You don't speak for country fans." "And you sure as hell don't speak for America," Joy bristled, her eyes flashing. "Excuse me, people like me? What's that supposed to mean, Blake?" "It means people who think they know better than everyone else," Blake snapped. "People who look down on small towns, on rural folks, like we're all just a bunch of ignorant hillbillies." The studio fell dead silent. The warmth of the opening minutes had evaporated. Whoopi shifted uncomfortably, trying to step in. But neither Blake nor Joy broke eye contact. "I've never called anyone ignorant," Joy shot back. "But I do believe we need honest conversations about representation, about inclusion." "Honest conversations?" Blake barked out a laugh. "Is that what you call this? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels more like an interrogation. You invited me here to talk about music. Instead, you want to lecture me about politics." The cameras kept rolling. The audience held its breath. The crew scrambled behind the scenes, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let it play out. This was live TV at its rawest. Unpredictable, combustible, and impossible to look away from. Joy slammed her hand on the table, the sharp crack echoing across the studio. "You know what, Blake?" she said, her voice ringing with authority. "I've been doing this for decades. I don't need some country singer strolling in here to tell me how to do my job." Blake leaned back in his chair, a dangerous grin spreading across his face. "And I don't need some talk show host who's never stepped foot in Nashville telling me how to run my industry. You want to talk about inclusion? Let's talk about how this show treats country music. When's the last time a country artist came on here without being grilled about politics?" "That's not true," Joy shot back. "We've had plenty of country artists on." "Name 3 from the last 2 years," Blake interrupted, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Joy opened her mouth, then closed it. A pause stretched uncomfortably long. The audience shifted in their seats. "That's what I thought," Blake said, satisfaction dripping from every word. "You don't actually care about country music, or the people who make it. You just use us as punching bags when it fits your agenda." Whoopi Goldberg finally stepped in, hands raised. "Blake, let's take a step back. This is getting heated." "No, Whoopi," Blake said, his voice firm, Oklahoma accent growing heavier with each word. I'm done taking steps back. I'm tired of people in media trashing country music and the people who love it. We're not your enemy, but you sure act like we are. Joy's composure returned, sharp as ever. Blake, nobody's calling you the enemy. But when you make statements that exclusionary? Blake's voice thundered over hers. Yes, exclusionary. When your words alienate people, they're going to be called out. Blake slammed a hand on the armrest, leaning forward. Lady, I've spent my whole career bringing people together. Mentored singers from every background on The Voice. Collaborated across every genre. And you? What have you done besides divide people day after day behind this desk? The studio was pinned silent. Every eye on the verbal duel. Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to intervene. Blake, let's talk about your charity work. Disaster relief. But Blake's focus didn't waver. No, you know the real problem? You can't stand that there are places in America where people think differently than you do. You can't stand that country music represents values that don't match your worldview. Joy's face went pale, but she snapped back with steel. How dare you question my record? I've fought for civil rights and equality long before you were famous. Blake laughed, harsh and unrelenting. Fighting? That's what you call sitting behind this desk, throwing stones? Where I come from, fighting means getting your hands dirty, not just running your mouth. Joy's hand twitched toward her notes, but Blake leaned even closer, eyes blazing. You gonna cancel me? Write a scathing article about how terrible I am? Go ahead, controversy sells records. That's the reality. The tension in the room was suffocating. The audience could feel it. The cameras capturing every sharp movement, every flash of anger. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a collision, and Blake wasn't done. The truth is, he said, voice low but fierce, people like you can't stand that the music I love, the fans I sing for, aren't thinking the same way you do. That's the real fight, and it isn't going away. The room fell into stunned silence. Even the crew behind the cameras held their breath, unsure who would blink first. That's not true, Joy protested, but her voice wavered, lacking the steel it had held moments before. Isn't it? Blake shot back, leaning forward, eyes piercing. Then why do you, and people like you, constantly attack everything we stand for? Our music, our beliefs, our way of life. You act like we're some disease that needs curing. Joy's anger flared, heat rising in her cheeks. Nobody's attacking your way of life, Blake. But when your way of life depends on looking down on others, or excluding them, yeah, that's going to be called out. Blake shook his head slowly. Incredulity etched into every line of his face. There you go again, he said, voice low but cutting. Putting words in my mouth, assuming who I am and what I believe. You don't know me, Joy. You don't know where I come from, what I've been through, yet you're comfortable sitting there judging me based on some stereotype in your head. Across the studio, the production team was in full panic mode, stage managers shouting into headsets, camera operators scrambling for angles, producers signaling frantically. The live feed captured it all, a perfectly contained daytime show unraveling into chaos. Joy rose from her chair, the flush of frustration deepening. Her voice rang sharp, commanding. You want to know what I see, Blake? I see someone with a platform that reaches millions, and instead of using it responsibly, you use it to sow division. You use it to tell people that thinking differently or caring about others is wrong. That's the part no one's talking about. Blake leaned back slightly, a bitter laugh escaping his lips, but his eyes never left hers. Division? He echoed. Lady, the only division I see is people like you thinking you get to dictate what the rest of us should believe or how we should live. You don't understand the lives we come from, the fans we sing for, the community we're part of. You're judging all of that from behind this desk, from this little bubble of your world, and calling it truth. The audience sat frozen, caught between awe and discomfort. Every camera angle held the tension. Every microphone captured the rising storm. This wasn't just an interview. It was a collision, live, unfiltered, impossible to ignore. Joy's jaw tightened, her hands gripping the edges of the desk. "Maybe I don't understand everything," she admitted, her voice cutting through the silence. "But I do understand that influence comes with responsibility. And right now, you're choosing spectacle over accountability." Blake's grin returned, sharp and unyielding. "Spectacle?" he asked, voice rising. "This isn't spectacle. This is reality. And reality is, people like me aren't asking for permission to live or sing. We're not here to please you. We're here to be heard." The room was electric. Every pause, every glance, every rising intonation held the audience and crew captive. Live television had never felt so raw, so unpredictable. Blake shot to his feet, towering over the table. "Perpetuate division?" he said, voice low, dangerous. That's rich coming from someone whose entire career is built on stirring up controversy every single day. "At least I bring people joy with my music." "What do you bring? Anger? Resentment?" "I bring truth," Joy shot back, her voice trembling with fury. "I bring accountability, something you clearly aren't familiar with." "Truth?" Blake laughed, bitter and cold. "Your version of truth, maybe. But here's some real truth for you, Joy. The people you claim to represent, the working-class Americans you say you're fighting for, they're the same ones buying my records, coming to my concerts. They don't need you to speak for them." Whoopi tried to intervene, her voice rising over the tension. "Okay, everyone, let's take a breath. We're adults. We can disagree without, but Blake wasn't done." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, yet somehow carried further than his earlier shouting. "You know what's sad about all this, Joy? You could have had a real conversation with me today. Asked about my music, the stories behind my songs, the fans who come up to me with tears in their eyes, telling me my music helped them through the hard times. Instead, you came here to ambush me with gotcha questions and political talking points." Joy sat back, posture still defiant. "I asked legitimate questions about statements you made publicly. If you can't handle being questioned about your own words, maybe you shouldn't be making those statements." "Handle it?" Blake's voice surged. "Lady, I can handle anything you throw at me. But I am not sitting here while you twist my words, paint me as something I'm not. I've spent my career treating people with respect, regardless of background, politics, anything. Can you say the same?" Joy's mouth opened, closed, searching. "I've dedicated my life to fighting for equality and justice," she said finally, her voice losing some of its fire. "Fighting." Blake leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "Your version of equality, your version of justice. But what about the millions of Americans who don't see the world your way? Where's their representation here? Where's their voice in your fight?" Sarah Haynes stepped in, voice cautious. "Blake, I think what Joy means is that everyone deserves to be heard, to be included." Blake's gaze softened slightly as he turned to her. "And I agree, Sarah, but inclusion works both ways. That means including people from small towns, rural areas. It means not automatically assuming someone's a bigot just because they live in Oklahoma, Tennessee, Alabama." Joy bristled. "Nobody assumes—" "Really?" Blake spun back to her. "Every time country music comes up on this show, there's a snide remark about backward thinking or outdated values. Every time someone from the South or Midwest is mentioned, there's this unspoken assumption they're ignorant or prejudiced." "That's not true," Joy protested weakly. "It absolutely is," Blake fired back, anger flaring. "And you know the worst part? You're perpetuating the very prejudice you claim to fight against, just targeting people you feel it's okay to look down on." The studio fell silent. Even the audience seemed to hold its breath, captivated by the raw intensity. Blake shook his head slowly, anger softening into something closer to disappointment. "Joy, I came here hoping for a real conversation, maybe find some common ground, but all you wanted was a fight." "I wanted honesty," Joy whispered. "No," Blake said firmly, cutting through the quiet. "You wanted to prove a point. Make me the villain in your story. Well, congratulations. You got your confrontation. Hope it was worth it." Joy's face went pale. She sat frozen for several seconds before finding her voice. "You think I wanted this? You think I enjoy confrontation?" Blake's eyes never left hers. "I think you live for it," he said, sliding back into his chair. Posture relaxed but stare unyielding. The cameras rolled on, capturing every flicker of emotion, every tightening jaw, every simmering pause. Live television had never felt this raw. Blake leaned forward, eyes locked on Joy. "I think controversy is your brand," he said, measured but cutting. "You manufacture it wherever you can find it." "That's completely unfair," Joy shot back, her voice cracking slightly. "I ask the questions that need to be asked. I hold people accountable." "Accountable to who, Joy?" Blake pressed. "To you? To this show? Or to the millions of people whose lives and values you dismiss every single day?" Whoopi made one last attempt to regain control. "Blake, we're getting off track here. Can we focus on your music?" But Blake wasn't done. "You want to know what's ironic?" he said, voice rising. "Country music is probably the most inclusive genre there is when it comes to storytelling. We sing about everybody: the factory worker, the farmer, the single mom, the veteran coming home from war, the kid from the wrong side of the tracks trying to make something of himself. We don't exclude anyone from our stories." Joy found her fire again. "But you do exclude people from your industry." "The numbers don't lie, Blake." "The numbers," Blake repeated, voice dripping with disdain. "You keep clinging to numbers like they tell the whole story. But numbers don't capture the heart of what we do. They don't show the kid in rural Mississippi picking up a guitar because he heard one of my songs. They don't show the dreams we inspire, the hope we give." "Hope?" Joy scoffed. "What hope are you giving young women trying to break into country music? Or artists of color who can't get radio play?" Blake's composure cracked completely. He stood, stepping closer to her side of the table, voice shaking with intensity. "Hope? I've mentored more diverse artists on The Voice than this show has probably featured in its entire run. I've lifted people from every background imaginable. But that doesn't fit your narrative, does it?" Security tensed, though Blake made no threatening moves. His anger was purely verbal, but it carried more weight than anything the show had ever broadcast live. "Don't lecture me about hope," he continued. "Do you know how many letters I get from fans saying my music helped them through divorce, depression, losing a job, losing someone they loved? How many people tell me country music saved their lives?" Joy's defiance wavered, but she pressed on. "I'm not diminishing that, Blake. But you can't ignore the systemic issues in the industry." "Systemic issues?" Blake exploded. "You want systemic issues? How about the systemic bias against country music in mainstream media? How about shows like this portraying our fans and artists as ignorant or backwards? How about the exclusion of country music from award shows and major cultural events?" The other hosts were silent, watching the verbal bloodbath unfold with a mix of fascination and horror. "You sit there in your bubble in New York, surrounded by people who think exactly like you and lecture me about inclusion?" Blake continued. "When's the last time you spent time in a small town, Joy? When's the last time you had a real conversation with someone who disagrees with you?" "I talk to people who disagree with me every day," Joy replied. "No," Blake corrected sharply. "You argue with them. There's a difference. Talking means listening. It means trying to understand. It means showing respect even when you disagree." Joy's voice dropped to a whisper. "I do show respect, do you?" "Nothing about this interview has felt respectful," Blake shot back. "Nothing about the way you approach this conversation shows the slightest interest in understanding my perspective, or the perspectives of the people I represent." The studio was so quiet you could hear the cameras clicking, capturing every flicker of emotion. Blake took a deep breath, regaining control. "You know the saddest part? We probably agree on more than we disagree on. We both care about people. We both want everyone to have opportunities. We both believe in the power of art and music to bring people together. But instead of finding common ground, you made this about politics and division." Joy looked genuinely shaken, her earlier bravado gone. "I never meant for it to go this way." "Maybe you didn't," Blake said softly for the first time. "But this is what happens when you approach every conversation as a battle instead of an opportunity to learn something new."